who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What is our relationship with Him? What is the time factor? What is the material creation? What is its purpose? What is its function? How does it operate? What is the structure of the universe? And so many other questions. What is our relationship to all these things? What is action? What is proper action? What is inaction? So many different questions can be answered because our proposition is that the source of this knowledge is reliable. It's an ancient wisdom system. It was written down 5,000 years ago, but actually extends much, much further into the past. There have been many great saints, sages, yogis, and seers that have tested the methods of the Vedas and have come out successful. Those histories are there. And also, it has an unbroken line of teachers for the past 5,000 years, extending up to the current day, culminating in the writings of Bhaktivedanta Swami and his commentaries on the Vedic literatures. So, unlike most other ancient wisdom systems, the meaning as it is still intact and has not been lost in the confusion of time. So I just want people to remember these things as we go forward in our discussion today, that we're going to be using the descending process of knowledge, and we're going to be comparing it to some modern-day scientific theories. The first thing that I would like to talk about in terms of that is, for example, in the Vedic literatures, there's a description of the cosmological situation. Of course, the main proposition of the Vedic conception of the universe is that it was created by a supreme being, and through different incarnations, such as Mahavishnu, then Garbhodakasayi Visnu, and also from great universal governmental agents such as Lord Brahma and the other very empowered living entities who are sometimes called demigods, that the creative process of the universe takes place under their superintendence, that it's not at all an impersonal operation, that it's very personal, and this is the Vedic description of the universal situation, that there's personality behind everything, that there's order to it, that there's a meaning to it, that there's a purpose to it. It's not impersonal, it's personal, and that the material universe is there. It has a specific function. Now, in regards to that, one of the theories of the Vedic cosmological situation I would like to read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15, Verse 2, description of the kingdom of God. By the force of the pregnancy of Diti, the light of the sun and moon was impaired in all the planets, and the demigods of various planets, being disturbed by that force, asked the creator of the universe, Brahma, what is this expansion of darkness in all directions? What's happening here is that Diti has become impregnated with a very great demon who is, after his birth and after he grows up, will threaten the entire universal order. So that at this time, there are inauspicious signs, one of them being that there's darkness expanding in all directions, and that the light of the sun and the moon aren't doing their function of keeping the universe illuminated. So let's look at the purport by Bhaktivedanta Swami. I'll just read part of it. It appears from this verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam that the sun is the source of light for all the planets in the universe. The modern scientific theory, which states that there are many suns in each universe, is not supported by this verse. It is understood that in each universe there is only one sun, which supplies light to all the planets. In the Bhagavad Gita, the moon is also stated to be one of the stars. There are many stars, and when we see them glittering at night, we can understand that they are reflectors of light, just as moonlight is a reflection of sunlight. Other planets also reflect sunlight, and there are many other planets which cannot be seen by our naked eyes. The demonic influence of the suns in the womb of Diti expanded the darkness throughout the universe. So at first blush, this may seem in total opposition to everything we've been taught in our whole life, that there is only one sun, that the stars that we see at night are actually reflecting the light, and that this is some kind of backward, cosmological, medieval nonsense, basically. But now, as shocking as it may seem, if we look at some of the most current and cutting-edge theories in cosmology and physics, let's look at the electric universe theory, especially the electric sun theory, which I have a little excerpt that explains the electric sun. Are stars powered from within, or does the power come from elsewhere? This was the question asked by Sir Arthur Eddington in the 1920s. He settled for the former, and this laid the foundation for the current mainstream models. Ralph Jurgens asked the questions again in the 1970s and opted for the latter. According to Jurgens, stars shine because they are connected to electric circuitry within galaxies. An electric star's brightness thus depends on the power of the electric current feeding it, not on the amount of nuclear fuel available to burn. Stars thus behave as electrodes in a gigantic glow discharge. The many surface phenomena that cannot be seen on the sun, hot coronas, sunspots, the many surface phenomena that can be seen on the sun, hot coronas, sunspots, prominences, flares, et al., can be all explained by an electric sun, but are more difficult to understand from a nuclear point of view. Nuclear reactions take place on the surface, not in the core, perhaps explaining why neutrino numbers vary with sunspot cycles. And these reactions were almost certainly produced in the same way that we produce them in the lab, by accelerating particles in an electric field. Stars, galaxies, nebula, and planets are all affected by electrical currents in the plasma through which they move. If the appearance of a star is determined largely by its electrical environment, it follows that it can change relatively quickly. So, I'm not a scientist, but I have studied these things a bit. So I'm going to try to put things in layman's terms, that the electric universe model and the electric sun model is basically stating that within the core of every galaxy there is a central sun, and that central sun, by electrical and electromagnetic currents over distance through plasma, is what is lighting all the different stars that we see in the sky. And even our own sun, it's kind of more a nexus point for electrical energy that is coming from the central sun, and that the energy of the sun is actually coming from the outside of it and not from the inside. For example, during different storms and solar flares, etc., they're able to peer down into the structure of the sun, and as they go further down into the center of the core, the sun gets cooler. For example, at the core, they estimate the temperature to be about 12,500 degrees. But as we know, on the corona, or in the atmosphere and around the outside of the atmosphere of the sun, the temperature is millions and millions of degrees. So, at first glance, while the Vedic model may appear to be incorrect, that there is one central sun, and that central sun distributes its light to the other stars and planets that we see, the most current theories in modern physics and the most cutting-edge theories that I believe will eventually be accepted as mainstream are saying basically the same thing, that the sun we see in the sky and the stars that we see twinkling at night are basically reflections or receiving their energy from a central sun that is distributing the electrical energy through different transmission patterns in the cosmic situation. So I think this is an excellent example of what I was describing, that through the inductive method, it's taken so many hundreds, maybe 300 years to come to this point. I mean, if we look back through the history of cosmology, long ago, most cultures around the world agreed with the Vedic version that the universe was created by a supreme being, that we could look at it from an earth-centered viewpoint, that the universe was basically like a ball or an egg with that we were contained inside of, that had a shell. For example, in the Vedic literature, it states that the universe is covered by 7 different types of coverings, which act as a protective cover. Some being earth, air, fire, water. And if we look back into the ancient cultures, such as the Greeks and the Scandinavians, there was a lot of coordination and there was a lot of agreement in the ancient wisdom systems that the universe was like a ball or like an egg that was covered by different coverings. Also, in a lot of ancient wisdom systems, there were central mountains that were located and kind of a higher dimensional sense that were part of the cosmological situation. For example, in the Vedas we have Mount Meru, and the Greeks had Mount Olympus, which as time moved on they moved to Greece, but in their ancient cosmology, Mount Olympus was kind of a cosmological mountain, a central mountain around which the universe was revolving. The Scandinavians also had a central island with a vast mountain, and in most ancient wisdom systems, the universe was seen to be some kind of ball or egg with a covering. Within that egg, there was a universal mountain around which pivoted all the stars and planetary systems. Of course, back in the days of the Vedas, there was the Surya Siddhanta, which described the Earth as a globe, and it predicted all the different movements of the stars and sun, and the perihelion and aphelion of different planets, eclipses and oppositions of the planets. So the ancients' practical knowledge of astronomy and astrology was also very at a high level. So it wasn't that they were all just caught up in some kind of mythology and that they had no practical working knowledge of the movements of the planets. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. At least I know from the Vedic perspective that the Surya Siddhanta was a very detailed description of the movements of the sun and planets. So while from our viewpoint nowadays we may look back and see, well, this is kind of a naive theory, just as we may think that the Vedic theory that there's one central sun distributing its energy to these other stars and planets around the universe is naive, but now modern day physics is actually coming to that conclusion. So we have to take it seriously. As time moved on, different societies became prominent. For example, after the Greeks, there were the Romans, and the Romans really didn't do very much as far as adding to the cosmological knowledge. They were more interested in politics, conquest, etc., and they kind of more went with the Greek model. Then we came to the Middle Ages where, again, there wasn't a lot of movement in the cosmological situation. People were still basically viewing things in the way that they had in the past, that there was a creator of the universe, that the universe was covered by a shell, that there was a universal central mountain, and this knowledge was coming down from ancient wisdom systems. Then we get to the Renaissance, where things started to change a little bit. This is at the time when Copernicus, he moved to the sun-centered theory, and with the sun-centered theory, that took the Earth out of the center. So we're getting away, and like I said before, in the Einsteinian relativistic viewpoint, we could say the sun is the center, we could say the Earth is the center, we could say any point out in the middle, and nowhere is the center. It all works out with the same physics. A lot of time in the ancient wisdom systems that they went with the Earth-centered view was because it was natural to people to look at things in that way, and it was easy for them to imagine how things were going on in that way, or to understand how things were going on, because it's from our point of view. So all these progressive steps as we go through history, it becomes more and more impersonal and more moving into the realm where the ordinary person can no longer understand or do the calculations or feel a connection with the universe and the universal situation. The universe becomes more impersonal as we move through the different history of the Western cosmology and how things have gotten to this point where we now believe in the Big Bang and that there is no creator, all these different kinds of things. And this also goes along with the Vedic perspective of the Yuga cycles.